The auditorium buzzed with excitement. Families clustered in groups, laughter and camera flashes bouncing off the high ceilings as the graduation ceremony swelled toward its final moment. Students in deep navy robes and gold-trimmed sashes took their seats, but all I could see was her, Christina, poised, radiant. My daughter. My throat tightened. I stood near the back, pressed against the wall, holding the camera with both hands, not because I wanted to, because they asked me to. Could you film from the back, Igor? My ex-wife Elena said sweetly, already taking her place in the front row with her sister and their picture-perfect seating arrangement. There are only a few spots for close family, you understand. A beat passed before her sister leaned closer and whispered, just loud enough for me to catch. He should be grateful we even invited him. Grateful. The word clanged in my ears as I adjusted the lens, pretending not to hear, pretending not to feel. But I clicked record anyway. Somewhere inside me, I knew this moment mattered. Not just for Christina. For me too. The ceremony began. Applause rolled across the hall like waves. I tried to focus on my daughter's face, but she never looked back, not once. She hugged her mother tightly when her name was called, and when I raised a tentative hand to wave, she simply didn't see it, or didn't want to. I kept filming. Later, I stood outside, near the steps, waiting. A few feet away, Elena beamed for selfies with Christina, her sister, even the dog of one of Christina's friends. I stayed out of frame. Like a ghost. A useful one, maybe. That night, I transferred the footage to my laptop. I didn't plan to watch all of it, but something made me pause at the 37-minute mark. The camera had still been rolling, pointed down toward the floor, and their voices came through clear. Elena, she must never know what really happened with him. Sister, you think she suspects? Elena, no, she knows what I told her. That's enough. It's better this way. I froze. Rewound, played it again. That wasn't about missing birthdays or the years I worked too late and came home too tired. This was something else. Something deliberate. And Christina, she'd built her coldness on a lie. I leaned back, heart pounding, as 1,000 unspoken moments between me and my daughter flickered in my mind. Her withdrawn glances, the way she flinched when I touched her shoulder, the polite, practiced smile that held no warmth. What did they tell her? What had they hidden? My hands trembled as I minimized the video and opened a folder labeled Letters. Inside were years' worth of emails I'd sent, photos I'd shared, even a birthday card I mailed when she turned 16. None of them answered. Had she ever even seen them? Suddenly I knew what I had to do. The camera that had made me invisible would now become my voice. This time, I'd record something that couldn't be ignored. 2 days after the graduation, Igor stood in front of his bookshelf clutching a thin stack of paper, letters he had printed out from old emails. The dates on them stretched back over a decade, each one a timestamp of hope. Happy 10th birthday, sunshine. I'm proud of you / heard you join the school choir. Wish I could be there to hear you sing / I'm sorry I was late again. I want to be better. None of them had ever received a reply. The house was quiet, eerily so. His apartment, sparsely furnished since the divorce, echoed with a silence that had once comforted him. Now it felt suffocating. Even the photos on the shelves, frozen smiles from a different life, looked like memories that belonged to someone else. He sat down and opened the video from the ceremony again. This time, he didn't watch Christina. He watched Elena. Her body language, her eyes scanning the room when she thought no one was looking, the way she leaned toward her sister, lowered her voice. Not cautious enough. She must never know what really happened with him. Those words pulsed in his mind like a siren. What had she meant? What version of me did you give our daughter, he thought bitterly. The hard-working father who missed dinners? Or something darker? He picked up his phone and scrolled to Christina's contact. His thumb hovered over the call button, then retreated. What would he even say? I think your mother lied to you? No. It would sound like desperation, like manipulation. Instead, he opened her Instagram profile, public as always. There she was, smiling with friends, holding a diploma, laughing beside her mother in a captioned photo. My rock. The strongest woman I know. And beneath that, no mention of me. He closed the app. Later that night, a strange impulse pulled him toward the attic storage unit. Dust clung to every surface, boxes stacked like forgotten tombstones of his past life. One box labeled Christina School nearly fell apart in his hands. Inside were drawings, crayon-colored cards, a bent hairband, and beneath them, copies of every birthday card he'd ever sent. Unopened, all of them. His breath caught. He recognized the envelopes by his own handwriting. He'd written them carefully, knowing she might read them one day, but the edges were sealed, untouched, dozens of them. She had never received a single one. His knees gave out, and he sat on the floor, the box in front of him like a coffin full of discarded chances. Elena hadn't just turned Christina against him with words. She had erased him. Quietly, surgically, over years. That night, Igor couldn't sleep. The next morning, he dressed methodically, like armor. Dark slacks, white shirt, jacket, not for anyone else, just to feel like himself again. He set up the tripod and positioned the camera carefully. Natural light filtered through the window, soft and golden, catching the fine lines on his face. He took a breath, then pressed record. What came out wasn't a rehearsed speech, but something closer to a confession. He didn't raise his voice or beg for forgiveness. He just talked. Talked about the long nights in the office when he should have been home, about the fights with Elena he tried to de-escalate, and the mistakes he didn't try hard enough to fix. He admitted to failure, not the kind Elena invented, but the kind that still haunted him. And then he told the truth about the letters, the erased birthday cards, the whispers he heard on video, and how it wasn't anger that drove him. It was the simple, aching need to be seen by his daughter, not as a villain or a ghost, but as a man who had tried and who was still trying. When he stopped recording, there were tears in his eyes, but no shame. For the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. Christina sat at her desk, earbuds in, eyes fixed on the screen as her father's face appeared in the frame. The lighting was soft, almost too intimate, like she had stepped into a room she didn't belong in. His voice came through low and steady, not the voice she remembered from childhood. Not stern, not angry, just tight. For a few seconds, she hovered over the pause button. She wasn't even sure why she had opened the file. The message came late last night with no subject, just a simple text. If you watch this, you don't owe me anything. I just want you to know the truth. She had almost deleted it. Now she watched. At first, she listened with crossed arms, skeptical. She was used to her mother's version of this man, the absent one, the emotionally distant one, the one who left her waiting on birthday mornings, too busy chasing deadlines to remember her ballet recitals. But the man on screen wasn't defensive. He didn't raise accusations or beg for sympathy. Instead, he started with an apology for not being there enough, for not understanding how quickly time was passing until it was too late. And then, almost reluctantly, he spoke of the silence, of the cards returned, the messages left unanswered, of letters he found sealed in a box, never opened. Christina's breath caught. She hadn't known. She'd never even heard of those letters. A ripple of discomfort spread through her chest. Her mother had always explained away his absence as disinterest. He's not the kind of man who knows how to love, Elena once said when Christina was 12 after he missed a parent-teacher meeting. Some people are just broken. Christina had carried that judgment like a quiet oath ever since. But now something shifted. Her father spoke of the graduation, of standing at the back, recording every moment while feeling like a stranger. And she remembered how she avoided looking at him, how natural it had felt to do so, how little thought she gave to whether he felt anything at all. She had assumed indifference, but maybe he hadn't been indifferent. Maybe he had simply been erased. The video ended not with a plea, but with a soft, almost whispered line. Whatever you choose to believe, at least now you have both sides. Christina sat in silence long after the screen faded to black. For the rest of the day, everything felt slightly out of focus. In class, she struggled to concentrate. Her friends' voices sounded distant. She kept returning to the image of him, slightly hunched, careful with his words, carrying regret like a second skin. That evening, she confronted her mother. They were in the kitchen, Elena plating a salad with robotic precision, when Christina placed her phone down and said, "Why didn't you ever show me the letters?" Lena's hand paused midair, still holding the serving spoon. "What letters?" "You know what letters. He showed me." Her voice didn't shake, but her jaw tensed. Elena blinked, then recovered quickly. "Sweetheart, that man has always been manipulative. He probably printed those last week to play the victim." Christina shook her head. "No. Somewhere dated when I was a kid. Birthday cards, photos, things I never saw." Elena turned her back, rinsing the spoon under the tap. "I protected you from his guilt trips, from the disappointment. You needed stability, not a man who dipped in and out when it suited him. He said he wrote that he called, that he tried. And I said he didn't try hard enough. There's a difference." Elena's voice was sharp now, clipped. Why are you bringing this up? Did he send you that ridiculous video too? That was all the confirmation Christina needed. The lie wasn't just in what was said, it was in what had been buried, denied, rewritten. I want to see the box, Christina said quietly. Elena turned, brows drawn. What? The one with the letters? Elena opened her mouth, then stopped, her eyes narrowed slightly, calculating. You're 18 now, you can decide what stories you want to believe. But don't expect me to entertain fantasies. She brushed past her, leaving the room. Christina didn't follow. That night, Christina lay in bed, wide awake. Her mind flickered through years of memories. Moments she had once accepted without question. Now they felt off-kilter, incomplete. What had her father really done that was so unforgivable? Worked too much? Spoken too little? Was that enough to justify being shut out entirely? She replayed the video in her head. The absence of blame, the presence of pain. It didn't absolve him, but it complicated everything. She picked up her phone and opened her contacts. Her thumb hovered again. Then, quietly, she tapped the screen. Cullen, Dad. The phone rang only once before it connected. Hello? Igor's voice came through, a little hoarse, uncertain, as if he hadn't dared hope for the call. Christina didn't respond at first. She could hear the background hum of his apartment, quiet, expectant. Hi, she said, finally. Just that, 2 letters, hanging in the air like fragile glass. She could almost hear the breath he exhaled on the other end. You watched it? He said, not a question. More like awe. I did. Silence followed. Not uncomfortable, but heavy. A silence full of things neither of them knew how to say. There was no script for this moment. No roadmap for what happens when a daughter sees her father for the first time. Not across a dinner table, but through a video camera. And not the father she thought she knew. I just wanted you to know I saw it, she added, her voice careful. And I heard you. Another pause. Thank you, he said quietly. That's more than I expected. Christina sat at the edge of her bed, fingers twisting in her lap. I don't know what to believe yet. It's all kind of a mess. I understand. I'm not saying you were perfect. But some of what Mom said, I wasn't perfect, he cut in gently. I never claimed to be. But I didn't deserve to be erased. That line landed like a stone. Christina didn't respond because there was nothing she could say. He was right. Somewhere between custody hearings and cold silences, between birthday parties and quiet absences, he had become more memory than man. A footnote in a life carefully curated by her mother. I want to meet, she said suddenly, just to talk. The line stayed silent for a beat too long. I'd like that, he said at last. They met in a small cafe not far from the university, a quiet, wood-paneled place where no one knew their names. Igor arrived early, dressed in his usual understated way. Clean blazer, worn shoes, freshly shaven. He looked older than she remembered, not just in the way time carved its lines, but in the way he carried his shoulders, weighted down by years he couldn't get back. Christina walked in, hesitant but composed. She wore no makeup, her hair was pulled into a lazy bun. She looked like someone who didn't want to pretend. They sat near the window. At first it was stilted, small talk. How classes were going, what the weather might do next. Igor asked questions, softly, never pressing, and Christina offered answers in careful fragments. Then, slowly, the silence between them began to loosen. She told him about her major, how she hadn't really chosen it yet, about a professor who reminded her of him, though she didn't say that part aloud. He spoke of his work, of how lonely the house felt since it stopped being a home. And finally, she asked the question that had been burning in her chest since she saw the video. Why didn't you fight harder for me? He looked at her, and in that look was the sorrow of 1,000 sleepless nights. I thought I was fighting, he said. I thought showing up, sending cards, calling, meant something. But your mother had already decided who I was to you, and after a while, I stopped pushing because I didn't want to hurt you by making you choose between us. Christina looked down at her tea. She told me you never cared. I did, he said, gently but firmly. More than you'll ever know. Her throat tightened. She kept your letters, all of them. I figured, he said. That's why I made the video. Cameras don't lie, people do. She nodded, blinking quickly. They talked for 2 hours. By the time they stood to leave, Christina didn't hug him. She wasn't ready for that, but she did say, maybe next time you could show me some of those old photos. And Igor, who hadn't allowed himself to hope for a next time, simply nodded. Later that evening, Christina returned home. Elena was in the living room, watching television with a glass of wine in hand. You were out late, Elena said casually, not turning. I saw him. Elena turned now. Christina didn't flinch. We talked. He told me a lot, and it didn't sound like lies. Elena's face hardened. So now you believe him over me? I believe both of you did what you thought was right, Christina said, but I'm done being told who people are. I'll figure that out for myself. And with that, she walked past her mother, up the stairs, and closed her door. For the first time in years, it felt like her own. The old camera sat on the kitchen table like an artifact. Igor hadn't touched it in days, not since that afternoon at the cafe. Not since Christina had asked, maybe next time you could show me some of those old photos? Now, as morning light filtered through the window, he opened the case. Inside, a small external hard drive blinked sleepily. Years of forgotten footage, candid moments, family birthdays, mundane dinners. He had never deleted them. Maybe part of him always hoped one day they would matter again. His phone buzzed. Christina, are you home? He stared at the screen for a moment, then typed, yes. Doors open. She arrived 30 minutes later, no announcement, no hesitation this time, just walked in like it was normal, like this had always been her house. She looked around slowly, at the walls stripped of family photos, the dusty bookshelf half empty, the quietness that had settled like a second skin over the apartment. She said nothing. But she noticed. I brought something, she said, reaching into her bag. She handed him a folded piece of paper. He recognized it instantly. The birthday card he'd sent her at age 16, one of the unopened ones. The envelope had been opened now, clumsily, as if done in a hurry. I read it, she said. Last night, he nodded. I meant every word. I know. It was a long pause. Not the heavy kind from before, but the kind that feels like space being cleared. I want to see more, she said, more of what I missed. He reached for the hard drive, connected it to his laptop, and opened the first folder. They spent hours going through the footage. There was Christine at 7, clumsily riding a bike while he ran beside her, laughing, a camping trip, a video of her sleeping in the back seat, her hand gripping his pinky finger like it was a lifeline. And then, a moment he had forgotten, Christina's 5th birthday, a small party in the old backyard. In the background, Elena looked exhausted but happy. For a few seconds, the three of them were in the frame together, laughing, blurry, alive. Christina reached forward and paused the video. She stared at the image. We were happy once, she said, barely above a whisper. He nodded. We were, before things started unraveling. I don't think Mom's a bad person, she said suddenly. But she's angry. She's been angry for so long, I don't think she even remembers why anymore. Igor didn't respond right away. He just let the footage continue. I used to think you left us, Christina said, that you gave up. But now I wonder if she just built a wall around us, one brick at a time. He glanced at her, unsure if he should speak. But then she looked at him. I think I'm ready to start again. Later, as she prepared to leave, she paused at the door. By the way, she said, her voice quieter now, you were right about the video. It didn't try to win me over. It just told the truth. He smiled. That was the point. She stepped outside, paused, then turned. Do you want to have lunch next week? She asked. Somewhere near campus? I like that. As the door closed behind her, Igor sat down again at the kitchen table. He looked at the camera, then at the paused frame still glowing on the screen. Him and his daughter, long ago, caught mid-laugh, unaware of what time would do to them. But now the frame wasn't just a memory, it was a beginning, a truth finally seen. And somewhere beyond the lens, something quietly healed.